à la réunion numéro 64.
Welcome to meeting number 79.
For the first hour, pursuant to Standing Order 1082 and the motion adopted on Monday, October 3rd, 2022, the committee will resume its study on the experience of women's veterans. For the first hour, we have two witnesses, but we are trying to get in touch with Mrs. Award because the sound check was not going so good. So let's pursue. And for the second hour, the committee will proceed to the consideration of matters related to committee business. La réunion d'aujourd'hui se déroule sous forme.
Today's meeting is being held in hybrid format. In accordance with the standing orders, members can participate in person or via the Zoom platform. Now, for those who are on Zoom, you have the choice between English, French, and floor. Although this room is equipped with a high-performance audio system, it's possible that feedback might occur. This can be extremely harmful to the performers and the interpreters, so please be careful not to place your earpiece too close to an open microphone so that we can carry on undisturbed and avoid any damage to the hearing of the interpreters. According to our standard operating procedure, we do audio tests before beginning. And I would like to obviously give you a warning on triggers. Before we welcome the witnesses, we may be discussing experiences related to mental health, and this may trigger viewers, members, or staff here who may have had similar experiences. If you feel distressed or in need of aid and help, please advise the clerk as soon as possible.
I would like to provide this trigger warning. We may be discussing experiences related to general health and mental health. This may be triggering to viewers, members, or staff with similar experiences. If you feel distressed or need help, please advise the clerk. J'aimerais maintenant souhaiter la bienvenue à nos témoins.
I would like to invite and welcome our witnesses.
Mrs. Callie Wong, and by video conference, we have Stephanie Award, veteran. So you will have 5 minutes, around 5 minutes for your opening statement, and after that, the members of the committee will ask you some questions. So if you don't mind, I'm going to start with you, Mrs. Wong. You are here, so you have 5 minutes for your opening statement. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I worry I might go over a minute or two, so I hope you'll forgive me. But I'd like to begin by acknowledging the relative privilege I've had in my military experience. Unlike many witnesses who have come before you, and unlike many women who have served in the CAF, I have never experienced aggravated rape. I was also a reservist who served only for 5 years and deployed once on a 6-month tour to Latvia. I never planned on the CAF being a lifelong career, and without significant bills to pay or a family to support, I always had the option to leave. I'm here because I believe I can offer a perspective as someone who has had a foot in both worlds. As a soldier, an operational soldier for a time, and as well as a student and advocate whose work has largely centered around discrimination in the CAF. In this opening statement, I aim to speak mostly to the two most formative experiences I had in the CAF, namely my BMQ and my pre-deployment and deployment experiences. I joined the Primary Army Reserves when I was 18 years old. I completed my BMQ and BMQL by 19, my trades training by 20, and I was deployed when I was 21 years old. I released last year at 23. In the lead up to my BMQ course, I was posted to a base on general duty as an untrained private while I awaited my course start date. During this time, a significantly older service member, a man, made unwanted advances at me referencing an Asian fetish that he had. This person also made jokes about keeping child pornography on his computer. So someone other than me had reported him, but as the victim of interest, I was the one who the report focused on specifically from that point on. The officer I spoke to told me that I would be asked to testify at a proceeding for the incident and that I should not speak to this person any longer. As far as I know, there was never a charge and there was never any follow-up with me. At the time, this service member was punished by being assigned meal hall duty, where he would count service members as they came in for their daily meals. But this meant that I saw him 3 times a day, every day, where he did try to talk to me. I later learned that this was not his first offense, and he was described generally as a crazy but harmless soldier who people had just learned to tolerate. This all happened to me in my first time of full-time work in the CAF. During this time, I was introduced to the military culture I would spend the rest of my career trying to push back against. The culture that called the knee pad inserts that went into our trousers promotion pads. The culture that had male staff on my basic training discussing their plans to sleep with certain female students after the course was over. And the culture that has an incredible tolerance for discrimination and sexual violence. There was an attempted rape in camp during my first couple weeks deployed in Latvia. The victim was a Canadian woman who, while only seeing the rapist in the dark from the back as he ran away, believed him to be a Canadian man. For my rotation, there were 500-some Canadian soldiers on base, but only the 30 or so Canadian women were talked to about this event. The proposed solution by the command team was to employ a buddy system amongst women soldiers and to discontinue use of the all-gender sauna. The men in the battle group, as far as I'm aware, were never spoken to about this incident. In Latvia, I repeatedly heard my male colleagues, even superiors, talk openly about their fantasies or sexual experience they've had with women soldiers around the camp. In conversation with a male superior, I heard my female colleague get told to, quote, not play the gender card while she was bringing up a concern she had to her superior. I heard one of my male colleagues talk about a Snapchat group where men from his regiment shared photos of themselves wearing their regimental caps during sex, at times without the knowledge or consent of the women that were involved in the sex they were having. One male colleague of mine during our pre-deployment training consistently overstepped articulated boundaries I had set, including him groping me, especially during events where drinking was involved, of which there were many. During my deployment and elsewhere during my career, I have heard countless stories of soldiers committing or attempting to commit sexual assault against either civilians or female service members. And even after these events came to light or were reported, many of them were simply moved to other units or at worst demoted 1 rank. There seems to be this doublethink present in the minds of a lot of Canadian male soldiers, that the sexual misconduct issue is being shoved down their throats, that the whole topic in the CAF has created this sort of witch hunt. But at the same time, I believe there's a general attitude of being able to get away with such acts of sexual violence because that has so consistently been the case with the people and stories we hear about every day in the workplace. The majority of women I've met in the CAF have experienced some form of sexual harassment and or assault in their career. Someone very close to me was sexually assaulted during her trades training course, and despite going through the arduous, oftentimes belittling process of reporting, she continues to work with her assaulter on a near daily basis. Throughout my career, I've heard different men of most every rank talk about how they feel women deserve the hardship they go through in the military. There is an unequivocal attitude that we, as women, are just barely tolerated guests in this men's domain. The best of us, and by that which I mean the most agreeable, the ones who can navigate the rape jokes, the sexualized culture, the misogyny with grace and humor, are bestowed the ultimate honor for a woman in the military, being one of the boys. I feel that there is a general deep incompetency of most military leaders to deal with sexual violence in their ranks. I also perceive a deep unwillingness to do so as well. I see and have felt a deep pressure to not report, and I've seen and felt a deep incapacity of this organization to deal with the cases of the people who do step forward. To close, I want to share 2 journal entries of mine I found while preparing for this witness testimony. The first is from about halfway through my deployment, and it reads, "So here I am, over halfway through a 6-month deployment, and I've grown so accustomed to melancholy. It feels normal to me. There are always good moments, of course, especially when drinking, but generally I'm sad. I feel defeated by this institution most days. I think a lot about what it's going to be like that first time I'm back home and sit down at Rachel's place surrounded by my friends, and I'll unpack what this experience has been like. And it's going to be heartbreaking, for them too, I know, to confess how unhappy I've been, but mostly how ashamed they would have been with me if they saw how much of a bystander I was. How silent I was for so many hateful moments, But I think it's even more challenging to reflect on what kind of person I will be after all this. How this will change me in a way that will show forever, I think. I think to some degree, I will always carry this defeat. This loss of faith in something I once really believed in, this disenchantment with the organization, and the belief in the potential for things to get better. I guess that's all just growing up, but a lot of growing up has happened in these 3 months. And I think when you have to grow up fast, you grow up a little different than you otherwise would have, given the grace of time. The second entry is much shorter, and it's from much later after I got back from Latvia. And it reads, "It's been a year since I've returned home from Latvia. These entries aren't about that experience anymore," which is crazy to say. For a time, it felt like life would always be relative to that experience. And that's not to say that I've reclaimed the woman I was and the qualities I had before I left. In fact, I'm slowly coming to terms with the possibility that I may never see that girl again, that I may never get my mojo back. And I've been making peace with that. I'm not all the way there yet, but I am making my way. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Wong, and thank you also for your service. And it's take a lot of courage to talk about this in front of camera, in front of people. So thank you very much. And we're going to take a 1-minute break in order to make sure that the next witness, if we have correct connection with Mrs. Hayward, please. So, je suspends quelques secondes.
So we will suspend for a few minutes.
Prenons la séance.
We will resume our hearing, and very unfortunately, Ms. Hayward is still encountering difficulties with the technical system. So we will continue with question period with our previous witness, and we're going to ensure that our technical personnel are going to continue to assist Ms. Hayward to get her back online.
Say to Mrs. Wong, so maybe that we're going to take a 5-minute break during this session. So if you need me to stop, so just let me know. So we're going to start with the first round of questions of 6 minutes each. And I invite MP Kathy Wagenthal for 6 minutes, please.
Thank you so much, Chair. And through you, Kaylee, welcome. It's an honor to have you in this room. I was able to have an extended conversation with you a couple of times back in 2021 when we discussed even the potential of someday this being dealt with through a study. Here we are, quite a while later. But I really appreciated your honesty and your professionalism in the way that you have moved forward with this circumstance in your life. But I want to refer to your journal. The first comment that you made from it was just shortly after you had returned home. Is that correct? The one that you read to us, or was that during your time there?
I read two. So the first one was during my time there,
Okay.
halfway through, and then the shorter one at the end was after I'd returned
Okay.
home.
So you indicated in the first one that you were really unhappy with yourself and that you felt ashamed in not stepping up and speaking up more. How old were you?
I was 21.
21? And how long had you been in that situation where you were trying to deal with this interference and inappropriateness in your life?
I would say kind of the neat answer would be at that point 3 months, or the 6-month span I was in Latvia. And then I continued to do work when I was back at home, but obviously the deployment environment is very different, where it is inescapable. You know, I was posted, and with COVID, we weren't allowed to leave the camp for an extended period of time. So I would say kind of 6 months of
Prison?
kind of inescapable military culture, maybe.
Right, okay. Thank you. So we talked in the past about this, and I had asked you a question back then. Did you think that somehow all of this could be handled and changed internally? At that point in time, you said you didn't think so. What is your perspective on that now? Because clearly this is systemic and needs to be dealt with, but I appreciate the challenges just from your short conversation with us today of what that would involve. So do you have any recommendations for this committee to say, listen, this is what needs to happen? And would you encourage your daughter someday to enlist at this point in time?
To answer your last question first, because it's a conversation I've had with different friends of mine, I think I would, theoretically, a daughter I would have one day would probably try to discourage her from enlisting. But as a woman who has been in the forces, I would never try to stop her, I think is my answer. In terms of the internal potential for change, I would somewhat maintain my answer that I gave you those years ago. Maybe with a bit more nuance, though. I don't think there is an internal capacity neatly for this issue to be solved. For a number of reasons, I think the structure of the military, the way that everything from culture change to battlefield orders are disseminated through the chain of command, I do not think that is the model that helps facilitate meaningful structural change of an organization. That being said, though, I think there needs to be internal champions for this issue, because I think as we've seen over the decades of various scandals that have come to light about the Canadian Forces, is that external pressure is never constant. And even though it's something that needs to coincide with an internal movement, I think, for something to go about that, there needs to be pressure from both sides. And I think the challenge externally is to sustain that pressure. And I think the challenge internally is to kind of highlight and select and empower leaders who maybe showcase characteristics that we wouldn't traditionally associate with, powerful, impressive military leadership, maybe traditionally, but those are the people who would be most able to perhaps establish the change that we're looking to all establish.
Okay. Your first experience with this person above you, how long was that into your very first exposure to the military? Like it was very, very close to the beginning of your...
Right, yes. So I joined in November of 2017, and then my first full-time contract started in May of that year, if I'm correct. Or, sorry, May of 2018. And so it would have been late May, early June when this would have happened.
Right. Okay, thank you. So you commented that people said that he was simply a harmless soldier. I can't imagine what it was like to hear the word harmless attached to this individual. Can you expound a little bit on what that did to you? Mm-hmm. Are you comfortable doing that?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, you're absolutely right. It was a hard thing to hear and a weird thing to hear, being assigned to someone who had said such problematic things, not just about me, but other stuff he had said. I think for me, in some ways, it set the tone of what to kind of expect going forward in this organization. For someone to kind of a man in his 40s maybe going after a 19-year-old girl who hadn't completed her basic training or anything like that, and also making these incredibly inappropriate jokes about child pornography, etc. And for that to kind of be written off by the people around me saying, oh, that corporal, he has a reputation, he's known for saying these, they would say things like, oh, really out-of-pocket things or whatever, but they always just send him back to his unit in Cape Breton and kind of hide him away there until the next rotation or the next summer season comes around.
So in that environment,
Sorry, time is up. Yeah, I'm so sorry, Mrs. Wagenthal. So we have to go to Mr. Miao for 6 minutes. MP Miao, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the witnesses for your appearance today. Ms. Wong, or may I call you Kelly? Thank you for being here and sharing your story. I must say it does take some courage and bravery to share this with us, and really thank you for the service you've taken. I know through your remarks you have shared the stories of what happened. Before I go on with my question, can you share with us what leads you want to serve in the Canadian Armed Forces?
Absolutely. Thank you for your question, sir. I came to Canada when I was 12. I was born in Malaysia, and my mom's Canadian, my dad's Malaysian. And when I first came here as like a young person, there was a real enchantment with Canada as a project, as a nation. There were rights afforded to me here that would never happen in Malaysia, especially as a queer woman. The reality of my life here is just so much different, so much richer than what could be publicly true anyways in Malaysia. And so I had a big, I think, romantic idea of Canada for many years of my youth after I first moved here. And that kind of coincided at the time a recruiter had come to our high school. And at 15, they talked about the reserves and, this is something you can do through university. And I never wanted it to be my full career, but I think combined with the ideas of like adventure and helping pay for school and, opportunity for challenge and growth, along with, I think, a very big part of that was the sentimentality I had about the Canadian project. And to a degree, a sense of nationalism about Canada is probably, why I joined.
And after you have joined the CAF, the experience you have, encountered, was this something you would thought to be in? Were you expected that something like this would happen to you before you joined the CAF?
No, certainly not.
And was there any investigation taken when you reported to your superior about the incident, and what kind of action was done, other than you mentioned demoting, the person demoting their rank?
So the incident that happened while I was on GD, so right before my basic happened, it was reported by someone other than me, and I was kind of told the timeline of how things would roll out, that I would be expected to testify at a certain thing, and, this person's unit in Cape Breton would probably, facilitate that to a certain degree. And that was the last I heard about it. I wasn't followed up with about that. And then the last I heard about this because I was telling this story to someone in my unit, and they, we named the person, and they said, oh yeah, he's still in Cape Breton at his home unit. So I don't imagine that anything has happened there. In terms of, there's other reports I've done, or sorry, not that I've personally done, but I've been somewhat a part of. I think the ones that have anything to do with sexual violence or discrimination, I can't think of one that I've been a part of or that I've heard of it that has been seen to, I guess, my idea of what would be justice. Yeah.
And even when you had the chance to share with your peers about the incident or this terrible experience, was there any other action that's been taken forward to address the Snapchat you mentioned with child pornography and Asian fetish, like these kind of things? I would imagine still happening right now in the military, right?
The only story that I shared or alluded to in my testimony that I will say there was something that did quite quickly happen was when it came to light that one of the instructors on my basic training course had talked about wanting to sleep with one of the students after the course was done. That came to light along with many other things he was doing. He was calling students faggots, and the N-word was said by him at one point during the course. Kind of in combination, that came to light with our course warrant, like just a higher up, and he was removed as an instructor from the course. But other than that, no penalty came to him.
And what would you like to see if this, not to say it will repeat itself, but if another member in CAF experienced a similar situation as you did, what would you suggest to our committee that would be a better way of addressing to concerns like this one?
For the example of the instructor on the basic training, I think a big thing is not just acting in the short term that makes the situation more comfortable for everyone. So in that situation, it would have been removing him from the course as an instructor. But that was it, that would have never been on any record of his. It would have, as an instructor, it wouldn't have impeded his ability to be an instructor at other basic courses. It was just the immediate fix. And so in that specific example, I think that when these issues come to light, it needs to be marked in a way that has an impact on their total career, on their character as a soldier, not just a circumstantial solution.
I believe my time is up.
Thank you very much, MP Miao. And we're going to take, once again, a short break. We're going to try to have Mrs. Hayward with us. So I suspend for a few seconds. Séance et voilà, succès, nous avons réussi à...
Very good. We're going to resume the meeting. We apologize, Ms. Howard. Everything's good. We'll get going.
You have sent us a lot of material, so you have 5 minutes, for your opening statement. Please, go ahead.
Hello, my name is Stephanie Hayward. I'm a Canadian veteran. I attended basic training in St. John-Quebec in 2009. Little did I know that I was in more in danger entering basic training campus on Canadian territory than if I was deployed to go to war in a third world country. I was drugged, kidnapped, and gang raped while attending mandatory training. Last thing I remember is dozing off in class after a lunch break and after the cafeteria, waking in complete fear in an unknown location and motel staff waking me. I completely naked with no identification, covered in blood and bruises, and couldn't walk. While the military government covered up a crime, the criminals climbed the ranks. I was forced into poverty and suffered medically untreated conditions for 11 years. I experienced homelessness, extreme poverty, poor living conditions, and many years I could only feed my daughter and not myself, as I couldn't afford food or essentials. Both my pregnancies, I had severe complications and the pain from untreated physical conditions from the military injuries. The pain got so bad for my second pregnancy in 2020 that I was put on bed rest and prescribed morphine. Both my children have medical conditions related to my military injuries due to labor. After 4 attempts to apply for Veterans Affairs over the years of 2010 and 2020, in 2020, when I was hospitalized for extreme PTSD and depression while pregnant, was when the social worker advocated for me to be able to apply for Veterans Affairs again. I was approved for the rehabilitation program 11 years after the date of my release. Veterans Affairs, even with being on a rehab program, didn't help me when I was on bed rest and on pain medications while in the hospital and medical expenses, even when it was being directly related to my military injuries. In 2020, November 2020, I started with the OSI clinic at Deer Lodge in Winnipeg. I started my PTSD therapy and it truly saved my life. I'm so grateful for the team of doctors and professionals as I was able to get secure housing, provide a safe and stable home for my children and myself. I want to make it very clear that I'm extremely grateful for Veterans Affairs programs and benefits as it had a huge part of gaining stability in my children's and my own life. So the matters I'm going to speak on are in areas of women that fall through the cracks because of programs are designed for male and their anatomy. With having an award of sexual dysfunction of 21% in 2021, and also the first critical injury benefit for sexual assault in 2021, and also other disability claims that equal 100%, due to my military conditions, I still have been fighting for basic treatments related to my women reproductive health issues, such as pelvic floor and physical therapy for my military injuries. I have spent the last 3 years fighting for medical treatments and have been denied, had to pay out of pocket just to be told that women's reproductive health doesn't have any treatment codes for women since 1992. I live in chronic pain fighting for basic medical coverage for the last 14 years. And I received no pay for Veterans Affairs until 2020. As a single mother, I have very little support outside the home. Sometimes I have none. I had to fight for 2 years to get Veterans Affairs Independence Program, as I was told I was choosing to be a victim over survivor when I was just asking for assistance in my home. With being the lowest paid veteran and Veterans Affairs only allow me to apply in June 2020, Veterans Affairs is refusing to pay for the lost years of pay, resulting in a huge overpayment of Veterans Affairs and them asking to take with them taking disability lump sums and withholding my pay for the rest of my life and a huge tax burden. Also due to the new threshold of income replacement, I am not entitled to career progression even though with having a DEC decision. The monthly amounts are not enough to cover my basic needs and attend my rehabilitation program appointments, and with the delay of reimbursement, fighting for dependent care and making it impossible to continue. Even after finally might be able to start pelvic floor therapy and other treatments related to my physical health. My children have high cost needs from my military injuries, causing them to need ongoing treatments and rehab with no medical coverage or help from Veterans Affairs. My question for Veterans Affairs is why are women not worthy of the same standard of care and entitled benefits as our male counterparts? Women veterans our pay is less than 17% less than males. The second question is why doesn't Veterans Affairs care for veteran children? We are raising the next generation of potential serving members, as I came from 2 serving grandparents, and my children had better coverage while I was on assistance. Military veteran children deserve better and matter too. The headlines talk about national offense and sexual misconduct, and no one looks on the treatment of victims after. Being re-traumatized and working with the outdated system and beliefs of Veterans Affairs. Veterans Affairs has the ability and resources to help empower women veterans. Instead, we are forgotten service members. I have educational background in community economic development. I have a list of recommendations for programs that could help bridge the gap of services. My right to serve was stolen, but I hope my testimony today will help protect future recruits of basic training, human rights, and help improve aftercare for sexual assault for all women. I would like to thank the Sexual Resource Center, Pensions Advocates, Vets Canada, Poppy Fund, and the National and Veterans Ombudsman for helping me try to navigate this very complex process. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Stephanie Hayward. And like I said, if you need a break during this session, 1 or 2 minute break, just let us know. And thank you also for your service and courage. And we already start questions with members of the committee, so we're gonna continue. And now I'd like to, je voudrais inviter. Yeah, and sorry, Mrs. Hayward, the interpreters told me that maybe during questions to go a little bit slow. I know that you said that you'd like to stay in your 5 minutes for your opening statement, but the interpreters ask you to go a little bit slowly. And maintenant, pour continuer la période de questions.
Now, to continue with our question period, I would invite Luc Desilets for the next 6 minutes, and perhaps you'd like to address your question to a specific witness. Monsieur Desilets. Thank you, Chairman, and good evening to my colleagues. Thank you very much, Ms. Hayward, and well, Ms. Wong is here, so thank you as well. You're both very, very courageous to come before us and share your experiences. I'd like to begin with Ms. Hayward. Are you still trying to get further compensation from Veterans Affairs? Is that still a live case?
Them last few since I started. I tried to appeal it twice for the income replacement, as my pay is actually honored from SIPA as basic corporal, but Veterans Affairs won't honor that amount, even though my injury was from 2009 and SIPA LTD long-term disability honored that pay. The problem is that SIPA is paying me one amount and Veterans Affairs is paying me a different amount. So it's two programs, but it's not coinciding. So like I'm not entitled to the 90% pay of my release. I'm only entitled to the threshold that is substantially lower than what my pay would have been today. So I'm trying to fight with them, but they took overpayments and they've taken disability payments and they've taken my pay. They've taken like anything they could take, they've taken. So.
Mais est-ce que vous avez d'autres demandes qui sont présentement?
But do you have any current demands or case going forward? Still working on it?
I've kind of hit like a brick in the wall because at this point I don't have any resources to pursue anymore because VAC says this is a military grievance, but then when I talk to D&D, they say it's a VAC issue. So like I'm just between two different people telling me it's their fault, but no one. And I have other veterans that were hurt at the same time as me, and they have basic corporal pay, but I'm not entitled to it. So.
Merci. Est-ce que vous avez l'impression que votre...
Do you have the impression that your military service had a psychological or physical effect on the health of your children?
Yes, due to my labor for my daughter, because of the sense of scarring and pain that I was in, like the scarring that I received from my sexual assault. I was on bed rest, but my pain was I was contracting early on. But then when my daughter came into labor, she got stuck at 9.5 centimeters where I couldn't push, she couldn't engage more because of my scarring. And I actually tore my cervix because I couldn't properly deliver. And it was due to untreated scarring and injury because of my sexual misconduct. I went 11, by that time I went, it was in 2009. So it was 6 years without medical treatment.
OK. Merci.
Thank you. The injuries that you had on delivering your child, did the authorities take that into consideration in compensation and determining your compensation?
Said no. They said they wouldn't look at it because it's childbirth. So it's another misunderstanding about women's health, and they wouldn't even consider it. I was literally hospitalized for extreme depression. I had to go for surgery, and when they were counting down, I didn't want to be alive anymore. I told them I'm in so much pain. My kids deserve better. And I woke up to a social worker helping me apply for VAC and stuff, but they wouldn't even cover when I was in the hospital for mental health supports while I was pregnant. And I was having a complete mental breakdown because my nightmares get the worst when I'm pregnant, because it's the same traumatic experience to my insides that it was to my assault. So it makes the nightmares and the night terrors flood back. So I was in extreme pain, extreme poverty, struggling with a 4-year-old and pregnant. And they still wouldn't cover the time that I was there. Even after being awarded the rehabilitation program, they still wouldn't cover any of the treatments because it was pregnantly related. But it wasn't, though. They wouldn't even listen to my gynecologist at all. They prescribed me morphine when my son was born. The doctors don't just prescribe that for just anybody.
Est-ce que vous recommanderiez à des jeunes de...
Would you recommend to our younger generation to opt for the military life?
From a family of military professionals that served, I love the idea of serving because you get to travel, you get to experience different things. And like, I think if the culture could change and actually respect human rights, and like, I understand you can't control every single person that comes into a military. Like, you can't judge a book by, like, you can't judge them when they first come in. But the fact is that after my injury, I was treated like the criminal. Like, I was treated like I was the bad person because I wouldn't change my story to meet their mandates. So instead of treating me like a human being, they treated me like an animal and kept me in basically a sea can until I was go home because I wouldn't change my story to what they wanted me to meet. They threatened me saying that I could keep my employment as long as I changed my story to whatever brackets of hazing they considered my assault, but they considered it as a hazing in like ritual. They didn't consider it as a sexual assault. But at the same time, during the last 3 weeks of my basic training, before I was to go back home while I was being like contained, they threatened me with my life. They showed me like all those things. So if they can change and like hold people accountable and like fairly treat people and provide like essential medical treatment after assault. Like if I was to provide a rape kit at the time of my assault, they would never question my injuries because there'd be proof and evidence and I could charge somebody criminally. But because they destroyed evidence and they did these things, I couldn't come forward with any information because they are the ones that hurt me. So.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. And, well, I forget to welcome one of our colleagues, MP Sodia Sidhu, who replaced Mr. Randip Sarai. And now she's on the video conference. I'd like to ask Ms. Blaney to take the floor for 6 minutes, please. Go ahead.
Well, thank you so much, Chair. And I want to thank both the witnesses for their powerful testimony today. You know, we've heard again and again from women veterans that they often feel that their experience is invisible. And in both of your testimony, you talked very clearly about how what happened to you was made invisible. There was no follow-up. There was no rape kit provided. There was no actions taken to move forward. And so I think this just reemphasizes that reality of feeling invisible and ignored. So I'm going to start with Ms. Wong, but I'm asking both of you the question. One of the things that has been very clear through this study is that data is a concern because it isn't gathered appropriately while women veterans are serving. When they get to VAC, often it's challenging to prove the things that happened because that data is not there. And so I guess it's a two-part question. One is, what data do you feel should be collected in the future so that when you get to VAC, you actually have the supports you need? And two, should that documentation happen internally? And that's what's happening now. Of course, things happen, everything is reported internally, or should it be an external process so that there's sort of a step away from the CAF while reporting incidents like the ones you experienced? Ms. Wong, if I could start with you first.
Thank you. I think Stephanie will probably be able to speak a little bit more to data in terms of going to VAC afterwards, but I do think that it needs to be externalized. The nature of like the military environment is that you are friends with, you know, in PMQ situations, live with, cohabitate, train with everyone that you work with. And I mean, sexual violence, sexual assaults happen usually in military settings with people that they already know. So I think the entire mechanism of reporting or data for incidents should be externalized, because even if there was like a more casual way to make note of something happening rather than engaging the formal reporting mechanism, I think that would be beneficial. And yeah, I hope that's answered your question. I know there was a two-parter, but I'm struggling with the other part.
No, I think you got it. Thank you. Ms. Hayward?
The problem about my assaults and the information that was collected was actually the pensions advocate had to call basic training in St. John, Quebec, and get my medical file that was sealed in a area that was never attached to my VAC document. So the only reason that I was able to go forward with my critical injury benefit was because we found the medical documents that they treated me for my sexual assault, everything to keep me alive, but they wouldn't provide a rape kit. And then when that information got to VAC, my decision got awarded with the medical information that was on file. But Veterans Affairs still doesn't use that information as valid information, even though it comes directly from DND, but it's still not recognized as information on my file to prove my medical conditions, even though it was enough to award a critical injury benefit.
And so do you think the collection of information, it's currently internalized, do you think it should be external in these kind of incidents so that there's more accountability and less connection to the CAF?
I think if it was a perfect world, if there was some kind of way that all women across Canada, and CAF included, sexual assaults are not just about the assault. It's about the collection of physical body after. It's the fact that victims deserve the right to a criminal court case if they can. And to find out through my studies of working with the National Ombudsman, only 20% of Canadian hospitals offer rape kits. And every single hospital that's around basic training or any kind of military base, there's 100 kilometers away to even receive it. And when contacting the Surgeon General, they have no interest in applying a rape kit protocol. And it costs $1.25 to provide these tests. And the sad part is that the collection of data, I believe it should be I think it should be like Victim Service Canada, where they have a different person that gets to report it, and then it can be information. So there's at least a middle person, because myself, when I was trying to report this, I wasn't even allowed to go to the RCMP. I wasn't allowed to go to civil. I was basically contained into an area, and I couldn't speak to anybody. I couldn't even go get sanitary pads by myself, even though I couldn't walk. I couldn't even go anywhere. And at the end of the day, I just found that if I had somebody to talk to that wasn't them, I did whatever I could to survive at that point, because I just was feared for my life. But if I had somebody else that just would listen to me, or just explain what happened, because to them, they labeled me as with all these terms that were military legal, and but never let me speak to anybody. And then when I got back home, RCMP said they couldn't do anything because there's no information. So they contain the information. And I believe that this is how rapists get away with what they do, because they get to hide the information. But if there's at least a way that we could trace it, so maybe somebody could be found, who's doing this, because I know I'm not the only victim.
Mm-hmm. And you talked about the fact that you went through extreme poverty and periods of homelessness after being discharged. I'm just wondering, did you get any sort of support from VAC to figure out what benefits you could benefit from to prevent you from being unhoused?
There was 3 times prior to 2020 that I tried to apply for Veterans Affairs benefits. The first one was in 2010 when I was escorted out of the building by security. The second one was in 2010 when I was suicidal, later in that year, and they denied it. And then when I became pregnant with my daughter, I ended up in Villa Rosa. It's a pregnancy shelter for women, because I couldn't work because of the excruciating pain I was in. They reach out to them, because it's part of protocol with the shelter that they reach out to any person that you can potentially have funding from, because I had no income. And they denied me at that point, even with working and getting addressed in different knots. I was denied. And then I ended up, Veterans Affairs wouldn't even talk to me until 2020. They wouldn't even accept any information from me until 2020.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So we have 15 minutes left. We're going to go for the last round of questions. And I'd like to invite for 5 minutes, Mr. Terry Dodell, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and I want to thank our guests today for their service, but also as well for your testimony today to hopefully help other individuals that are either currently serving or plan on going through at some period of time. I just happened to see a report come out today, a shocking report, disturbing report from Stats Canada, that there's a significant increase in sexual misconduct in the Canadian Armed Forces that just came out. Actually, I just saw it while we were here. And extremely disappointing numbers. When we look at, originally they did a study way back when on sexual misconduct in the military, which I was part of at that time, I believe at early 2020. And the numbers that we're seeing here, as an example, in 2016, 1.7% of the people reported sexual assault in the military workplace. 2018, 1.6%. And in 2022, now we're seeing 3.5% of the individuals. So it's not getting better. I don't know, we did a report. I don't know if those were actually acted upon, which is extremely unfortunate to see those kind of numbers come through. And when you're telling your testimony, especially Ms. Wong, when you were saying, those that committed these awful crimes in the military, they just either were demoted or moved on, and that you're a barely tolerated guest at times, those kind of comments are extremely disappointing. So I'm just wondering, what can we do as an organization? Like, do we need more females in the higher ranks? Like seeing some of this, that you said, you're a bystander, you feel bad at that particular moment in time. I'm sure there's a lot of that. What do we need to do? Because these numbers are absolutely shocking, and we're not going to get people that want to join the military, and certainly don't want them to have the experiences that the two of you have had here today. So just your comments on what we can do to improve on that.
Thank you for your question. I don't know that it's going to be a simple solution by any means. I don't think that adding more women to senior positions, I mean, I'm sure it's a good start, but it's kind of that analogy of a different captain at the same ship, and just kind of a numeric representation rather than something more substantial. One thing I think that does need to be targeted early on is the training system and the way that we articulate to soldiers that they are good people just in virtue of being in the military. So almost any grievance that happens outside of that is still kind of lessened because of the fact that they're a good man in the military. And I think that is why sexual violence is sometimes so reduced, because it's an organization with more important things on its mind, to be frank, with national security, with Canadian sovereignty, et cetera. So I think, and the way that we train soldiers to believe that this is, we're preparing them to potentially die for their country. So anything else outside of that is almost secondary. That's what you're being trained to do. So I think a reconfiguration of what we say we want in a good soldier, not just outside the merits of courage and bravery and all of this, but to be a good person, to be an ethical, just person in the civilian realm as well as the soldier realm is a start.
Thank you. And I have another question, I guess, for Ms. Hayward. I know in your testimony you were talking about frustrations with VAC. We hear that quite often, that there's silos definitely from when you leave National Defence and Veterans Affairs, and the frustrations that are there. Do you have some recommendations or something that we can improve upon how we deal with those situations? That it's done in a quicker response, but quite frankly, so that the forms, I know we've been pushing that as a party for a long time, that the forms might be a little bit simpler to hopefully be able to get some information back.
I do believe that it's changed a lot, because before they wouldn't let me even apply. So I do believe that they've taken some steps forward, but I believe that the best recommendation that I have is just why doesn't Veterans Affairs trust the doctors that are in the communities? I submitted doctors' reports and different medical conditions. I reported every information I could, but they won't accept it because it's not under their list of doctors or their list of recommendations. But we trust providers, but for some reason, veterans case managers are allowed to make medical decisions for veterans, and I just don't know how that's legal. But at the same time, I know they're just trying to do their job. My case manager is lovely, but at the same time, when a doctor is explaining something and trying to get medical forms, why don't they trust the provider? They went to medical school, so why aren't they worthy of giving an explanation of what kind of treatments are available? I do believe forms, I wasn't even aware my file was stored somewhere else until the Pensions Advocate found it for me. So I think at the end of the day, I think if somebody was to go look at these files in colleges and see what kind of informations are there, because I think there's a lot more information there than we even know.
Thank you, Mr. Dordel. And now I invite MP Caroline Bennett for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, and thank you both for your testimony and your really upsetting stories, I think, that we've heard too often. And I just to start, I was wondering, Ms. Hayward, in the last paragraph where you said to thank the Sexual Resource Center at D&D, is that the Sexual and Misconduct Resource Center that was set up after Deschamps?
Yes, that's the same one. Yeah.
And I guess having been part of Women's College Hospital, where we set up the first sexual assault care centers 30 years ago with rape kits for everybody, and then eventually we put in freezers because women didn't necessarily want to report it right away, but if it went in the freezer, then they could report it when they felt they had sufficient psychological support to be able to do that. Like, I think there are systems out there that don't seem to have infiltrated D&D or Veterans Affairs, and I think what we keep hearing is that D&D doesn't seem to have a system for women's health, and doesn't seem to link sexual trauma with a poor pregnancy and labor outcome with postpartum or perinatal mental health. Like, it doesn't seem to have got the memo. And I think what we're also hearing is that there's, as Rachel said, that the data isn't there even while people were serving. So MAC doesn't seem to know that this should be compensable. And I think we're hearing a lot that there should be just a presumptive approach in terms of compensation. So I guess I mean, firstly, we're really, really grateful to the recommendations you've put there. And I think certainly, Ms. Wong, that story about the instructor just being moved somewhere else, I think we've heard that, whether it's priests or doctors or whatever, everybody just gets moved. There's no real consequences, and there's no geographic cure for this. These people, there need to be consequences because it adds to the trauma. This person got away with it, right? And so I guess I am asking, what more could we do? And I also think in terms of a systems approach. And for Ms. Hayward, I was very impressed with the idea that there should be some approach to children in terms of intergenerational trauma, of what their parents went through, male and female. But how do we look after those children who've been exposed to the intergenerational trauma? So say whatever you want, and then send us whatever.
Yes, thank you, ma'am. I think the first thing that comes to mind in terms of what is to be done, I think there's been now, 2 reports, 2 external reviews made in the last 6 years on the precisely same issue. There's an immense amount of overlap between the recommendations between Deschamps and Arbour. I fear that there is maybe the possibility that this will go nowhere, that it's the matter of implementation of these recommendations, the policy graveyard that we've been warned about. Beyond that, I think that a big issue that that the military internally is unwilling to really engage with is that this whole issue, systemic sexual violence, is a result of the unfulfilled process of gender integration in the military. Because throughout, the 90s, 2000s, et cetera, so many military leaders have claimed that we are a gender integrated military. We've had women in our ranks in all trades since 2000, whatever. And it's been just kind of this check in the box, when we can really clearly see that this add women and stir thing that we've done in the military has had these awful consequences, such as systemic sexual violence. So I think that needs to be really deeply understood by military leadership, and I don't get the sense that it is, that this isn't an issue of biology or even just simple culture. This is the process of the unfulfilled task of gender integration in an organization.
Yes. Mrs. Hayward, you have a few... Yes, go ahead.
This might be, I don't know if people are going to take this in the wrong way, but I respect it in the way. I feel like the first bit of basic training, I think they should separate genders until they get the first few weeks, just to get the grips to understanding the concept and, understanding how the process works. But at the same time, until they can set up these systems to protect the under-marginalized people from getting injuries, because I know it's not a modernized approach, but a lot of other countries don't train men and women together at the same time. At the same time, that doesn't mean that there's other like same gender assaults. But at the same time, I believe that it has to start with the very foundation of how these people are getting trained and how they're coming in. And but if they don't change from the level of the bottom, it's not gonna, and if they don't change the top views, it's not gonna meet somewhere in the middle. So I do believe that if, as Ms. Wong said, I don't think that when they mixed in females into the ranks, that they properly integrated them. I think they just did it to meet a standard of what the government policies were to meet the standard of women diversity, but they didn't take the complex situation of putting 99% males and 1% females into the same pool of people. And because I know when I went to the basic training, the concept was that you're either 90%, 99% men, 1% women, and then 3/4 of those people, girls, are lesbian or gay or bi, and that if you're single and young and unmarried, that you're basically open target. And so it's just one of those things where it's a culture belief, and us as women can't go against 99% men. You know, like we can't do it. Like we're not like I know women are strong, but if they don't implement that at the highest ranks going down, then it's never going to be adapted to the way it should be.
Thank you very much. So we're gonna go to two quick interventions.
On va permettre encore quelques interventions brèves. Monsieur Desilets, s'il vous plaît. Mr. Desilets, you have the floor. Ms. Wong, have you ever heard of summary? You can go either by indictment or by summary conviction. So, summary conviction. Have you heard of summary convictions, summary charges?
C'est à mon tour. Non, pas si vous avez assisté, mais il y a une façon de faire, semble-t-il, dans l'armée qui est de se faire juger par des pairs.
There is a situation in military law that they talk about a summary charge.
Attended one? Is that the question?
C'est à mon tour. OK, regardez, on passe à une autre question.
All right, I'll move on to something else. Would it be preferable to have certain groups composed only of women, as was mentioned, segregate the sexes for a while?
An immediate benefit to it in terms of we might see, you know, kind of, I think there's this idea of like kind of the red zone where it's the initial period of basic training or the initial period of any start of a new thing that sexual violence is more likely to occur. So in terms of like there might be immediate benefit with those numbers going down, but I think it would be, I don't think it's a progressive move by any means. You know, there are other militaries that separate gender for sure. I think if we were to do that in Canada, if we were to have to do that, and that's the solution we commit to, especially long term, I think it would be quite disappointing, because the reality is that these soldiers are not going to work in a segregated environment, and sexual violence doesn't just happen at basic training. I understand the sentiments definitely made by Ms. Hayworth, but I don't think that is the long term solution. No.
Merci. Vous avez fait allusion tantôt à l'incapacité du...
Alluded earlier of self-management or self-discipline, if you will, so that we could avoid, regressive sexual behaviors. But that's an external imposition on a particular person. What do you think? Who would be responsible for that?
maintaining this external pressure on the military. I suppose that would be the people in this room.
Non, ça, bon. C'est correct. Je pense que j'aurais terminé mon temps de toute façon. Merci beaucoup.
Okay, I think my time is up. I'll try again some other time. Thank you, Mr. Desilets. Last intervention, Ms. Rachel Blaney. You have 2 minutes and a half.
Thank you so much, Chair. So I'm going to come back to Ms. Hayward. You talked a lot about the reproductive health issues that you have because of your military injuries. And I'm just wondering if you could tell us, do you feel that VAC recognized the severity of these issues? And did they fully consider the benefits that should be provided? And if not, which it sounds like it was, could you just explain what gaps you see there in terms of treating women veterans' reproductive health?
During the last 3 years, since I've been trying to get physical therapy for my pelvic floor, I was denied. Like, I was fighting with them. I've had to pay out of pocket. But when I had to contact VATS Bundsman to discuss these matters, I actually found out that all women's reproductive health has no treatment codes under it, and it hasn't been updated since 1992. And you can quote me on that because Veterans of Bundsman will confirm it, that they had to go in and physically change the codes, and they have not been updated. So, like, I don't know if any woman veteran has received reproductive health treatment benefits. And I have a pensionable condition that is like an umbrella where I'm able to access these treatments. But when it goes to the claims department or with Veterans Affairs, I get sent to 4 gynecologists to prove my injury or to do another assessment. And the thing about sexual assault is that these procedures are very invasive. So, like, I don't want to go to 3 different providers. Like, I want to go to one, do the physical therapy and get out. Like, I've been trying so hard for the last 3 years to the point now I can't afford to keep going with my childcare or because I don't get reimbursed in time, that I can't afford to continue right when I might be able to receive it. But every time there's a physical injury, even with the new rehabilitation program, it's been so complex to try to understand why they make you go through all these steps when, like, to me, it's common knowledge. To providers outside of VAC, it's a common knowledge that pelvic floor. If I was to injure my back, pelvic floor is one of the number 1 treatments for that in VAC. So why isn't that for sexual misconduct? Like, I don't understand why, like, injuries are different by territory. But I do believe that Veterans Affairs needs to have specialists in women health come onto the team and, like, redesign the table of disabilities to represent women, because right now the table of disabilities doesn't represent anything when it comes to women's health.
Thank you so much. I think my time is up, but I would love if you could send something written to us about how that could better accommodate single mothers, because you brought that up and I didn't have enough time to ask questions. So would love you to explore that. Thank you so much for your testimony.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you to both of you for your testimony. And we will stay in touch with the clerk. And je veux dire aussi pour les membres du comité.
And to the members of the committee and for myself, we are completely stunned that you would have to suffer such negative events and negative behaviors. We wish you very, very well in your future careers, and we wish you a good, stable family life as well. I'd like to thank them both for their presentations. Ms. Stephanie Hayward.
As veteran, thank you. And we're going to take a 2 minutes break because we're going to go on camera. So thank you very much and stay in touch. Thank you for coming. So meeting is suspended.